We've heard a lot of complaints, from fans, media, whatever.
We're building a team that we believe is going to sustain its competitiveness.
The goal is to get it to that championship level. Every move we made over the past couple of years is with that in mind.
But this is a process.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
We're not here focused on the record. We're focused on improvement.
At the end of the day,
You can't just snap your fingers and say, oh, we're going to be a better culture now. It takes months, years.
And that doesn't happen overnight.
What we are is young, exciting, hardworking, and going to improve.
Absolutely.
I am absolutely convinced that we are in a better place now than we have been.
It's transparent. It's just out there. It's glaring.
My response to that, I think, is
We did new things that had never been done before. We have breakfast and lunch now.
People don't realize that.
With a combination of draft picks and free agency,
We expect to be competing right up to the very end.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
All right, Rick, we are back, and we are here to do this week the Tough Watch 25, formerly known as the 25 under 23. So we broke this into 3 pods last offseason, and there's a little bit of a name change. There's a little bit of a structural change. And Rick, why don't you tell the listeners what exactly we changed about this year's list versus last year's?
So we basically decided to go with years served instead of just raw age. And we thought that made more sense because there's just a huge range of when guys enter the league. And so as opposed to doing the age 23 cutoff, which last year led to a number of players that were just way more experienced than other guys, and which made it kind of an unfair comparison, comparing someone that had played in the league for 1 season versus somebody that had played in the league for 4 to 5 years. It just didn't really work out. So we decided to do draft class guys on rookie scale deals, and so that would be 17, 18, 19, and 20 drafts. We decided to drop out the 20 draft because these guys haven't played NBA games yet, and it would lead to the same problems that we were just describing with having the age 23 cutoff. So we're restricted to those 3 draft classes, and we just think it's a more accurate way to go about it, because so much of what is going to determine the success of these guys outside of maybe the top 7, 8 guys is what team are they on, what were the circumstances in which they came to the team, how do they factor into their team's long-term plans. And that's just a lot easier to make an apples-to-apple comparison if all of the guys are in a similar salary structure, came to the teams the same kind of way. And so we just think it's going to be a little cleaner, a little easier to make comparisons. And so that's how we came to be the Tough Watch 25 instead of the 25 under 23. And this will probably be what we'll do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get right into it because we got a lot of ground to cover. And last year we broke it into 3 pods. We're doing 2 this year. So we're going to do 25 through 14 on this pod, and then next week we'll do 1 through 13. So we'll start at the top, 25 on down. So 25 is John Collins. So Rick and I, last year we did Rick's list. We both created one, but we just decided to choose Rick's as a master, basically, for the podcast. This year, we both created lists separate from one another, and then we came together before the pod and worked it into the official Tough Watch 25 that we agreed on. So John Collins made the 25 spot kind of on an island at 25 for a couple of reasons. And John Collins is in a very unique circumstance. The team has basically made every offseason decision needed to let John Collins go. Right. They just everything they did was in service of not needing John Collins and being comfortable letting him go.
Let's also include the 2019 draft in that too, because I think Reddish and DeAndre Hunter are either currently straight 4s or project to be able to play a lot of 4 if they pan out. And I'll spoil it to you, only one of those 2 guys is on our list, so it's not like Atlanta or any other team should really be hanging their hat on those guys. But 19 offseason and then this 20 offseason, you're right, they are set. They're laying the groundwork for John Collins to not be there.
Yeah, and this is a league that pays for production, and John Collins is undeniably productive, at least on one end of the floor. So what I'd like to say about John Collins, which will lead into the next guy on the list really nicely, is you're basically deciding with him because he's an undeniably great offensive player. Now, granted, he's done it on a 20-win team, so we'll see if that would ever contribute to actually winning. But he career averages of basically, well, not career. Last year, we'll go 19-20. He was 21-10 with basically 60-40-80 splits. So efficient offensively and just a hyper-productive offensive player. Somebody in the league is going to pay John Collins. There's no doubt, because it's really hard, especially with young players, a guy who's ascended every year and has grown his game every year. It's really hard to find guys like this. So somebody in the league is going to pay for him, but they've totally wrecked any trade value that he may have had because, again, they did all of their offseason moves in service of letting him go prior to just making the deal to get him out of town before that. So, I mean, there's not really a spot for him in Atlanta. Who knows how that ends up playing out, but I mean, he's an undeniably productive offensive player, huge defensive question marks, and then the one big thing, and you preach it all the time, no positional versatility at this point. He's a 4. He's a 4 only on both ends of the floor. He cannot switch and play on a wing. He cannot, I mean, he could play offensive center, but I would argue if he is an offensive center, he's going to be a little bit less productive than if he's a 4 and he has another guy alongside him to pull maybe a 7-footer away from him. But that's kind of John Collins in a nutshell. I like him. I think he's a good player worthy of being on the list, but some real limitations that other guys on this list may not have.
Yeah, and we're always viewing guys. It's funny because it's a podcast obviously all about bad teams. And so he's actually kind of a quintessential tough watch guy, a guy that produces on a bad team. But we still look at all of these guys through the lens of winning basketball and playoff basketball. And it's very difficult to find examples of teams in the current NBA and then kind of what will we think the league will be for the next handful of years that would have much of a use for a, kind of an offense-only 4-man. It's just it's tough, especially because the stuff that he does offensively so well is kind of traditionally what teams look for in a center, being a dive man, giving them that vertical space in the pick-and-roll lob game, even having the ability to stretch from 3. And it's going to be really interesting to see him next to Clint Capella, because that is, with the exception of shooting, like that's Clint Capella's role, is to set screens and dive to the hoop. So it's like, if you're out there with Clint Capella, then, you know, where is John Collins on the floor? He shot the ball really well last year, so he's definitely going to be spacing. Is he now just more of a standstill shooting guy if he's playing with Capella? And then on the flip side of that, if he's the roll man in a pick and roll game and Capella's on the floor, where does Capella go? Is it now cramped up in a way where he's not going to produce as much? And, you know, I only say all of that to say that's the situation he'd find himself in on a lot of teams. And that's why he's lower on the list than some other guys. It's probably our least favorite position is a 4.
And to be honest, I mean, you brought up offensive-only 4s. I mean, Bobby Portis, we saw what he got on the open market. Julius Randle signed, you know, money-wise, he signed a good contract in New York.
Yeah,
but I mean,
sure.
that's the most.
But he's not somebody that you think is going to, you know, he's kind of on an island as far as a guy that's like.
What do you do with him?
Yeah, do we think? And then, you know, another guy that's a really productive offensive big, Hassan Whiteside, just signed for the league minimum coming off of a season where he was probably in the top 15 in the league in PER, I would guess.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, that's not to say that Collins is relegated to that fate. It's just to make the observation that it's a really tricky position. And it's probably one of the reasons why we had Obi Toppin quite low in our draft rankings was because it's just like you get down the road with these guys and it comes time to pay them and you're like, and you get a little squeamish about it. You're just like, is this the type of 4-man we really want to pay? And we'll transition that into 24, which is PJ Washington. He's someone you're very fond of. This is somebody that looks more like the type of guy you would want to pay to play that position. Why is that?
Defensive versatility, period. He plays both ends of the floor. He had a productive last season offensively, but not obviously he's not John Collins production wise. But it's the defense. It's a guy who can play multiple positions, which is really valuable. A guy who can defend multiple positions. And again, we just ran through a few names of guys that are primarily just offense-only fours. It's clearly the league is telling you there is no value in that skill set. And P.J. Washington, at least to this point, with one season of work put in, looks like he certainly isn't an offense-only guy and looks like he probably is going to make his money primarily being a defensive guy. Charlotte's already come out, and the reason I wanted him on this list so bad was Charlotte's already come out and said, we're playing him a ton of center minutes. We're going to put him at center, and we're going to see what we got. And Charlotte has, just like they did last year, they got a really weird team. Really like, James Borrego as a coach. So I mean, I'm pretty long on them as a franchise going forward. But in the short term, it's just such a goofy roster that if they're already signaling they're going to put a second-year player that's 6'7" at center, they know it too. Like, this is a team that's not going to be. I mean, they could push to be in the play-in, but I mean, they're doing what I like a team like Charlotte to do, which is like, we're going to throw shit at the wall because what are we doing? Like, are we going to act like we're competing for like a 6 seed? We're not. So it's like, let's just throw shit at the wall. Let's spend the season figuring out what guys can and cannot do. And I'm in total support of it. So I'm pretty high on PJ as a player, but I love that after this season, as they kind of move him around the chessboard a little bit and try him out in different ways, we're going to really know how versatile this guy is.
Yeah, and I love that they are going to, so they'll play probably a heavy dose of LaMelo Ball with either Rozier, Devontae Graham, or Malik Monk, all guys that are pretty small. But if you have LaMelo, Gordon Hayward, Bridges, PJ Washington, that's 4 guys. You said PJ Washington is 6'7", so are those other 3 guys. So it's like you're gonna have basically like a version, like a tough watch version of the Rockets last year. And I think you would compare PJ Washington in role to somebody that has fit well around James Harden in that Mike D'Antoni era in Houston, and that archetype of wing big hybrid is just exceedingly valuable on any team, especially when it comes playoff time. Another guy I would compare him to, not in game, but in role, would be Jeremy Grant and what he did for Denver last season. And we saw how valuable he was when he came to be on the open market.
Yeah, no shit.
No, but just having a guy that's in that range where it's like, okay, that you can squint and say, okay, he could credibly guard bigs and smalls, and offensively is not going to take anything off the table because he's not someone that creates offense. He's someone that's going to get his offense through other players, and especially this team now has a lot of playmakers on the team. Like Graham and Rozier are probably a little bit below average in terms of point guard playmaking, but they're still fine. Like, they're both low-end starting point guards in the league. So they have 2 low-end starters. Still starters, though. Like, definitely top 30 point guards in the league. LaMelo Ball and Gordon Hayward, 2 very good playmakers, or at least we predict LaMelo Ball will be. Him and Miles Bridges, and to whatever extent Cody Zeller still plays for them, like, they're going to get some easy buckets. And, the more that we're talking about the team, the more that I actually think they're just going to be they could be a tough watch favorite for us this year because of the way that they might be able to play, albeit with probably not a ton of success. But
they're certainly going to be a tough watch favorite. The lineup you just labeled there, that 4-man lineup of all 6'7" guys, I fucking love that. I'd watch that today. I want to see it. And
now
honestly,
I'm regretting not having Miles Bridges ahead of John Collins, and then it's like we're just like, okay, what Charlotte guy do we want to have?
Yeah, and honestly, the only reason PJ Washington made the list over Miles, at least for me, was Miles. If you want to call these guys tweeners, which is actually like a badge of honor.
Now I know it's so funny how that's changed. It's like now, what was the worst guy, although a good player, to be able to fit into the NBA like 20 years ago? It's like, man, what do we do with Josh Smith? It's like, what do we do with a guy like Josh Smith? And now it's like, dude, if you could get Josh Smith in the NBA now, oh my God. Think of Josh Smith next to Karl Anthony Towns.
And to be honest, the league has switched it so much that you'd actually want 2 of them if you could.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you could swing 2 Josh Smiths, give me more than 1. But no, what I was going to say is they will be a favorite of ours because for whatever reason, and again, it could be the coaching, the team plays really hard, which I love because they're not then a slog to watch play basketball. And you're right, it may not work. Like, there may not get a ton of wins, but it's going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch because we're going to actually be able to see what these guys can and cannot do. And I think they're going to have such interesting lineups that it's going to be hard for teams to match up with them. But again, it's going to be dependent on a lot of factors. And LaMelo Ball could just have a really rough rookie year given the team that he's on and given the fact that they're in, throw shit at the wall mode as an organization to see what they have with some of their other players. Let's move on from PJ, though, to 23, RJ Barrett. So, RJ, my question for you is this. RJ, it's obvious what RJ could be in a vacuum. Like, if you just looked at his skill set, especially when he was coming into the league, you can kind of see what he could be. My question to you is, being in New York on that dog shit team and now playing for Tibbs, which for him, I really don't believe that's going to be a great thing for him.
Not on the Knicks. It could be a good thing for him going forward.
Sure.
Could be a really good experience for, whatever team he's on 5 years from now.
But what are the odds, do you think? Like, if you were going to put a percentage on it, what do you think the percentage is that he actually reaches gets close to reaching his peak potential?
I think higher than you think. I just think the reason I say that is because I think he's a pretty driven individual that is a really high character kid that it's so funny how it's the car driven off the lot analogy that people like to make with young players and draft picks, where like he is a high schooler, an AAU player, like he was every bit the talent and somebody that was coveted as what Cade Cunningham is right now. And it's just like, as soon as he got to Duke, where he produced dad stats like crazy at 18, like the dude averaged 23, right? A game as a 18-year-old at Duke. Comes into the league. He's not finished. He's pretty rough in basically every regard. He doesn't currently have any A skills, and it's just like everyone's like kind of done with the guy. But he has the pedigree because of him being the best player at his age group for a very long time in the youth circuit, of somebody that should and could become a really great player in the league. And he is, and we're going to see this with the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards this year. He was so young, and these guys are going to continue to come in young, especially when they get rid of the one and done in a couple years. The dude played his entire rookie season with the Knicks at age 19. He turned 19 years old like 1 week before the draft last year. And for him to be that young and to be able to even be on the court at all and not just like completely shit on the floor when he's out there is an achievement, honestly. Like, he was not good and did not contribute to winning. And he got entitlement minutes because of where he was drafted with the team. But like, if you're going to make that commitment to drafting somebody that young, you have to do that. And that's what the Timberwolves are going to deal with Edwards this year. Like, Edwards is going to be worse on the floor than the other guys on the team that have way more service than him. But like, if you're going to commit to drafting somebody that young, you have to let them develop. And Barrett, what there is to like about Barrett is there's just very few guys that come into the league that have that archetypal value that he has, where he is legitimately wing sized and he could become a primary ball handler. He's not right now. They put him in that role last year with no shooting around him, and he really struggled. But there's just, we're going to go up and down this list. There's the guys that play that archetype that have any kind of success at all are in the top 5 of our list. So if he has a decent season this year, he's going to be in the top 10 or higher on our list next year. Because that's just how valuable it is to have a 6'7" guy that is the lead ball handler on your team.
Yeah, and I'm still high on RJ. The thing that just pisses me off is I don't mind, because these guys that get drafted near the top almost always go to terrible situations. But what drives me crazy is like what they did last year, making him a primary ball handler. That's fine. Like, give him a ton of reps, let him fuck up and make mistakes. It's really healthy for development. That becomes unhealthy the further along the player goes if you do not make market improvement to help the guy out. And the thing that I worry about with the Knicks, and I could be dead wrong. I mean, who knows? We'll see what Obi Toppin is, and we'll see what Tibbs can do as a coach. They need to do better around him. And I'm not even saying they need to put like elite talent around him. I would like them to. But they at least have to have guys, like last year when they brought in all those fours, you mentioned the fact that he's a primary ball handler without any shooting. It's like, it's not hard to find shooting, man. I'm not saying bring in elite shooters or elite players, just players that can do something that takes some pressure off of RJ, for fuck's sake.
To that point, it was very funny to see all the money Philadelphia spent this year on coaching and front office. Obviously, they bring in Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey just... Daryl Morey is undeniably like a brilliant basketball executive. So I'm not saying this to take a shot. I'm just saying like he came in and he got Seth Curry and Danny Green and everyone's like, this guy is a fucking genius. It's like literally, I think anybody that has played with Philadelphia on 2K, it's like, what's the first move? All right, we got to get these two shooters next to these guys. Like, it's so obvious, but teams do fuck this up all the time. And
yes, they do.
New York, it's going to be another goofy situation. I think it's likely he'll be more productive because he's not 19 anymore. He's 20. Like he had a year of taking these lumps. But the basketball situation is going to be bad, like you said. So it's like he's not going to, unless he is like truly transcendent, which maybe.
We'll see.
He's not going to be putting up like good numbers this year. Like it seems pretty unlikely because it's like, how is he going to be efficient out there when there's no spacing on the floor and no real reliable outlet guy where it's like, well, okay, if RJ doesn't have it going, who's creating offense here? I literally don't know who that player is. Like they're probably, they're like the inverse of Charlotte, where it's like they're not going to be one of our favorite tough watch teams unless some of these other young guys they have show something. But I mean, RJ is what? He's 2 full years younger than Obi Toppin, and so like the dude is so young, man. Like,
no, and I don't think there's any way that RJ Barrett plays himself out of being a starter level player in the league. Like I think RJ Barrett with development is going to be, at the very least, he's going to be a starter. The question is, like, to get him to his peak, the team has to do better. He's not a transcendent superstar talent. So what you need is, I think he's an elite talent. I just don't think he's a superstar transcendent type player. So because of that, you got to just have the team help you out a little bit. Like, you just got to have the team help you out. And I do not trust that the Knicks, from what I've seen, are going to do a great job of it. But I root for RJ like crazy.
We are going slow.
So next, yeah, that's all right. Next on the list, honestly, it's a great pairing with RJ Barrett. Number 22 is Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton, young guard, offensively gifted, playing for an absolutely terrible organization that does not seem to have a great idea of how to build a future for their young players. They're a throw shit at the wall team too, but it's not like Charlotte. Charlotte, it's a throw shit at the wall, but it's a lot of interesting stuff. Cleveland, it's a throw shit at the wall, meaning like we're going to just collect players and have really no plan as to what to do with them or who we want to keep long term. Colin Sexton, he shares a backcourt with Darius Garland, who, spoiler alert, did not make this list. Darius Garland, you and I called it last year when we watched him play twice in the first like 20 games of the year we covered Cleveland, and we were like, we're out. Yeah. Like the dude's not good. Like this guy's not going to work. But Colin Sexton is not that. He's proven, like I said, he's proven to be a good offensive player in a short time in the league. What I want to know from you, Rick, is Colin Sexton, if Cleveland starts to get this shit right, meaning they start to actually build out a team and a roster, is Colin Sexton the type of guy that you can actually have as your starting point guard and win?
Probably not, but that could have more to do with just what you look for in that position than anything. But I think that he is somebody that you could very comfortably be like, well, this guy is probably currently and has the floor of like a Dennis Schroeder. So I think that's just already that's something good. And the thing about Sexton that I'm encouraged about is he has improved on things that people have said were his weaknesses. So he came into the league and everyone was like, well, he's a very athletic, straight line player that is going to put pressure on the rim, but he can't shoot. and he can shoot. He can shoot the ball really well. He is now, for his career, a 39% three-point shooter on somewhere between 3.5 to 4 attempts a game, and he is a career 84% free throw shooter. Like, the dude can shoot the ball really well. And so I think that obviously portends to him improving in other areas as well. When we were putting the list together, you and I were like, it is amazing the way that people talk about this guy because, again, very super young guy, age 19 rookie year, age 20 second year, turned 21 last winter. He's going to be 21 for most of the season this year. Like, puts up 20 a game efficiently. This is not like an RJ Barrett situation or many young players. Like, most young players are not efficient. Like, he efficiently put up 20 a game. But everyone's just like, yeah, he kind of sucks. Like, that's just like the main takeaway about Colin Sexton. It's like, this dude doesn't know how to play basketball. He doesn't know how to play with other guys. And you're just like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, you and I watched them play a lot the last 2 years. They're no one's idea of a fun team to watch. But
no.
And he is a tough guy to have be your first pick of a rebuild. Like, I will grant you that. Like, it's a lot easier when the first pick of your rebuild is Trae Young. And you go like, okay, we know what we got here. We have our franchise guy. We can go around. Like, Sexton, ideally, they would have drafted another guy in the last 2 drafts that is better than him. Ideally, Darius Garland would have been better than him. Ideally, Isaac Okoro would be better than him. We don't know. Yep. We don't know if that's going to happen. And so it's a bad situation. But for me, he's a guy that it's like, okay, he gets 20 a game right now and is basically an above 40% three-point shooter. I don't know. I would take him on any team with having said that.
Well, let's be honest. Scoring the ball and averaging 20 a game, especially when you do it efficiently, which he does, I don't care that you're on a bad team. Like, averaging 20 in the league efficiently is a thing. Like, that's really difficult to do. Like, we throw these things around as though it's like, well, yeah, he's averaging 20, but he's on a bad team. It's like, how many guys in the league are averaging 20 fucking points, man? How many young players are averaging 20 points? Like, it's not an easy thing to do. The criticism of Sexton that I have, and this is why I asked you the way that I asked you, is like, I agree with you. Like, I think he's got a pretty high floor, and I think he's going to have a definite role in the league, whether it be in Cleveland or not. My question is, and yes, he has a terrible roster, but he averages 3 assists career. He's not a point guard that has proven that he really knows how to play make and set up for others. He can set himself up. He can get to the cup. He's really athletic. He can draw contact. He can get to the line. We just need to see him develop as a passer even a little bit, because I'm fine if your primary, it's not my cup of tea, but if your primary skill as a point guard is to score, there is room for you in the league. What I don't like is if you're going to be my starting point guard, you got to have some playmaking. Yeah, and some
you need to be on a team that has wing players that are handling your playmaking duties straight up. Sure. And that's why Dennis Schroeder has found a lot of success in OKC is he played with Russell Westbrook and then he played with Chris Paul. And he's going to have a lot of success with the Lakers because he's going to play with LeBron James. And he had no value whatsoever when he played for Atlanta, and he was the primary guy. So it is very situational, but so are most guys in the league, honestly.
Correct.
Like, other than the most transcendent players, it is a situational thing. And with Sexton, I'll be curious to see what his shooting numbers are this year, because if I just told you, like, hey, man, there's a young guard in the league that is 47 from the field, 38 from 3, and 85 from the line, you would be like, this guy's a dead-eye shooter. This dude is a dead-eye shooter. So it's like, with the thing is, he's never really shot threes at volume. It'll be, what if they have him shoot 9 threes a game this year? What does that look like? Does his efficiency go way down? I mean, it probably would go down a little bit because that's how it generally works. But if he took 9, 10, 11, 12 threes a game at like 36, 37%, he is going to average a shitload of points and will be a super valuable player. So it'll be interesting to see what type of offense they have out there if Isaac Okoro's playmaking translates at all, because if you have him playmaking a little bit, they're stuck with Kevin Love. He's a good playmaker. Andre Drummond is honestly an underrated playmaker at center, and so is Larry Nance. So it's like they actually could be kind of good. Like, they're not going to very unlikely to be in that play-in range, but like they are stuck with the vets that they have, and they're all pretty solid. And they have this guy in Sexton that can efficiently score on the perimeter, and they no longer have Jim, a.k.a. John, a.k.a. I don't remember what his first name is, Beeline there anymore. Like, maybe they could be okay.
Here's the thing, man. It's not... You and I do this all the time when we talk about tough watch teams. You start talking your way through their roster, and you're like, it's not terrible. It's not bad. They got some stuff. It's like, yeah, but the team has no direction. They don't know what they're going to do with any of this.
No.
I mean, and again, that's the whole thing. It's like when you say it's like Kevin Love, Andre Drummond, Larry Nance, Colin Sexton. You got some Kevin Porter if he doesn't get jailed. Like, that's pretty good. And it's like, yeah, but nobody really knows what they're doing with any of those guys. So it's like it's going to be disjointed, which will lead to losses, which is why they're going to be bad. But let's move on from Colin Sexton because we are going at a snail's pace. Number 21 is Lonzo.
Yeah, it's the opposite of Colin Sexton.
The exact opposite. One of our favorites, Lonzo Ball at 21. Lonzo Ball had a terrible bubble. I'm willing to wipe it away from my memory. I would like to wipe it away from my memory.
I'm willing to wipe away every bad thing he's ever done on the court from my memory because that's what I do.
Agreed.
With Lonzo Ball and his comparison, Rikki Rubio, and all these guys that play like this.
Absolutely. Some of our favorite guys in the league to watch. So here's the thing with Lonzo. I was listening to a podcast that Danny LaRue did, and for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name. It was the guy from the guy who covers shit. This is terrible. It's the guy who Action Network guy. I can't remember his name.
Matt Moore. Shout out to Matt Moore.
Shout out Matt Moore. Anyway, but Matt Moore was talking about how there is a real crisis in New Orleans with the kind of the cohesion with the roster, and
it's a really weird roster.
Really weird roster, and there's some personality issues. And he mentioned that part of it is that, you know, Lonzo is a guy who believes he should be maybe the best player on a team or one of the best players on a team.
Does he though?
Well, it says Matt Moore. I don't know how plugged in he is in New Orleans. But for me, whatever happened in the bubble, and it was super weird for a lot of guys and teams, to be honest with you. Like, it was a lot of fun and it worked, but there was some weirdness that I'm willing to kind of chalk up as just the oddity of the circumstances might have led to some stuff.
Dude, Dan. Are you going to use, at your work, are you guys going to look at the 2020 numbers the same way you looked at the numbers on any other year? You're not.
God, I hope not.
No, you're not. And it's like, I'm not using the 2020 numbers for my business going forward. Like,
yeah, fair point. Fair point. Yep.
The year is garbage. It's a throwaway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And we won't spend a ton of time on Lonzo because you and I have talked about him a million times, but I love his game. We continue to love his game. I think he has incredible value in New Orleans, and I actually think he's like the right guard to keep in New Orleans, so I hope that they work this out because I think I just think with that New Orleans team, what's really fascinating to me is it's again that thing of like, well, if you just look at the roster and you go piece by piece, you're like, God, I really like this New Orleans team. And then you kind of wonder, it's like, okay, well, how are these pieces going to fit together? The difference in New Orleans in comparison, I mean, first, the talent's way better than Cleveland. I don't want to compare that. But when you wonder how they're going to fit the pieces together, the difference is New Orleans has a good blend of guys who have been in the league and played in the league for a little bit, Lonzo included. And I think it's going to add a certain level of competency to their situation that isn't going to be found with a lot of other young teams. And
New
I just
Orleans
think
is
like
fake young.
They're fake young. Exactly. Yep. Well put. So anyway, yeah, Lonzo, he's one of my favorite guards in the league, will continue to be so. The only thing that I really want to see is whether it be in New Orleans or another team is somebody just embrace who he is as a player and stop. We just need to stop nitpicking the guy.
Stan Van Gundy will. Like, he's a great Stan Van Gundy player. He plays his ass off. Defends 1 and 2 really well. Probably going to creep up to being able to defend the 3 here pretty soon, if not this season. Is a hit-ahead guy. Is going to get them a lot of easy buckets in transition. He rebounds the ball very well for his position. Is the best outlet passer and transition player in the league in terms of just keeping his head up and looking for easy buckets. If he can shoot the ball off the catch in the way that he did for most of last season, he's going to be awesome. Like, straight up, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and he doesn't need shots, which on a team that has a bunch of guys that will, he's perfect fit.
Yeah,
Good
it's
starter.
funny. It's like the inverse of a lot of these guys we were talking about, because it's like he could be like a 10-5-10 guy, 1 block, 2 steals guy, and it's just like it's the same reason why we like PJ Washington. It's like that's a clean fit on any team with designs of winning. Like,
yep,
as your point guard or your 2 guard or as a guy off the bench. Like, that is a guy that will help you win games.
Yeah, it just fits. Let's go to 20. I'm going to let you lead this one. This is your guy. If PJ Washington was my guy, this is definitely your guy. We're going to Killer Cam, aka Cam Reddish. He's number 20.
Harlem.
So
Actually, I have no idea where he's from.
Talk about Cam. He's from Norristown, Pennsylvania.
PA. Cam, his struggles have been well documented. He was an elite high school AAU player. He was terrible at Duke. He had a terrible in 75% of his rookie season, but he was quite good in the last 25% of the season. And you take that 25% and you look at the fact that this guy is a legitimate 6'8", possibly 6'9". Unlike a lot of young players, the dude is stacked. Like he's like he's like the Patrick Williams of this most recent draft. Is very smooth with the ball. Has a beautiful jump shot that doesn't go in. But you look at all of the young guys in Atlanta, and if you line them all up, you'd be like, that's the guy. Like he's just an eye test wonder. He really is, because he just looks like a star. And so this is a home run swing of all home run swings, because it's a lot, like I said, with Barrett, although in a different way. It's like it's even rarer actually than Barrett, is how many young guys have this build and are competent at all basketball players and are young. And it's like none. Basically, there's like 5 or 6, but like he at least has the size and the basketball outline of somebody that could truly change a franchise if they could connect the dots and if they were that good. And you and I have major doubts about that.
Yeah, and we're right to have doubts, but here's a feather in his cap. He started his season last year historically bad. I mean, we made a couple jokes on podcasts about like his shooting splits were so atrocious you would almost have to actively try to have shooting splits as bad as his were. What I love about him, though, is it would have been so easy being that young and having no experience in the league and starting off that poorly. It would have been so easy to just let that get into your head and allow it to totally impact the entirety of the season. He did not. He finished really strong, and kudos to him for being able to do it, because to get out of that rut and make himself a productive and useful player on that Atlanta team is really good for him. And I think most people are projecting that what we saw in that 25% of the year at the end is going to, be what's replicated going into his second season. I am on that side. I bet that, because you mentioned how beautiful his shot is. It's like the guy could not get a shot to fall. He was sub 20% from the 3-point line and sub 30% from the floor up until his turnaround. There's no way he's that bad. There's just 0% chance he's that bad.
No, he's not that bad.
Yeah, and so I think what he did in the that tail end of the season is going to be what we see in year 2. And to be honest with you, you mentioned when you line these guys up, if they were in a gym and you were tasked with picking the guy that you thought was going to be the best basketball player, not only would you pick Cam Reddish, but the guy he was drafted with and after,
and not on the list.
Yeah, and is not on the list is DeAndre Hunter. And like Cam Reddish, the upside of him is so much greater than DeAndre Hunter. And I got to be honest, I think in year 2, we're already going to be able to tell that Cam Reddish is going to be the better of those 2 players.
100%.
So,
and by the end of last season, he was a lot better.
A lot better.
DeAndre Hunter was already.
Yeah.
You just look at the improvement he had through the season. So Dan did a great job of talking about how bad he was the first 2.5 months of the season. Month of January, he was up to 30% from 3, and you're like, okay, well, it's not 20 anymore. Month of February, he shot 40% from 3. And then in March, he shot 35, and then in the last couple of games in April, that was February, and then in March, the last couple of games, he was shooting like 48% before the season got shut down. It's like after the new year, the dude was like, if you put all that together, was around 40% from three, and multi-positional defender. Like I said at the beginning, great frame. Already, I think he's, of all their young guys, I think he's going to be the one that is going to fight through these additions they made in the offseason and be like, we just got to get this guy in the court.
I would agree with you. Let's go to 19. That is Mikal Bridges. So Mikal Bridges also has a really good frame. He's more slight than Cam is,
right?
But he's putting on size every year, which every young player does when they come in the league. Mikal Bridges might be the best wing defender outside of OG Anunoby on this list.
Also on the list, yeah.
Also on the list, yep. And Mikal Bridges, excellent wing defender. Super long arms that get talked about constantly. They're referenced the same way Kawhi's hands are. And he also is a good three-point shooter. And so he is the 3-and-D guy that everybody looks for.
He's a universal fit.
Universal fit everywhere he would be. Phoenix obviously made the Chris Paul trade, and they expect that they're going to be a playoff team, and I expect them to be a playoff team.
I think
Mikal
they're going to
Bridges
fucking rule.
I think they will too, and I think Mikal Bridges is a huge part of that. Mikal Bridges was a guy that you and I, we didn't love him coming out of the draft.
Didn't like him his rookie year.
Didn't like him his rookie year as much. But here's what I'll say about it. Like, you and I both understood the pick because he was a guy who shot the three well in college, and he had that frame, the long arms, and you're like, well, I mean, you could do a lot worse. I mean, I don't know if it'll pan out, but I mean, if you're going to be drafting, it's a positional need everywhere in the entire league. And if it works, like, you're going to have one of the few kind of unicorn type players that do the 3-and-D thing at a high level. So he's exceeded what my expectations were. And I think in Phoenix, the one thing that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough is, you know, there's a lot of talk about like, well, you're going to have, you know, Paul and Ayton, that pick and roll. Booker's going to get to play off the ball. The thing that doesn't get talked about is like, yeah, and you have Mikal Bridges, who's not only going to space offensively, but is basically going to help cover up a lot of shit defensively. Him and Ayton are going to cover up a lot of shit defensively. Devin Booker isn't terrible.
I think
he's not
going to
good.
try this year, and I think that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, I agree, but he's not a good defender.
No.
But Mikal Bridges allows you to be like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, it really doesn't. He's going to cover up a lot of deficiencies on the wing. So yeah, I like Mikal Bridges a lot.
I do too, and I mean, I think this is probably about. No, there's a couple, maybe one or two guys that are a little higher. This is almost as high as you could get, though, for somebody that we think is just going to be a really good, and currently is a really good role player. I mean, it's the difference between him and Cam and we just obviously have more confidence in Mikal than we do with Cam because of what they've done. But it's like, whereas Cam is all about upside and maybe his floor, or not his floor, maybe his upside is only being as good as Mikal Bridges is currently. You know what I mean? But we also go like, well, he could be more. Mikal Bridges is probably not going to get that opportunity in his career, and that would be the wrong use of him anyway. It's like the role he's in right now is the optimum role. They just need to play him a lot of minutes, which they will. And he's in a starting five that just fits beautifully together, offensively and defensively. The amount of open looks he's going to get from Book and CP is ridiculous. I mean, that playmaking on the perimeter is going to be amazing. Like that it's got to be up there as far as just guys, like tandems of players that can get easy buckets for dudes. And you're going to have Bridges and Cam Johnson spacing. Ayton, we think, is going to be really good this year. Like, offensively, this team is going to be a monster. And defensively, with him, Ayton made humongous strides last year. CP doesn't take shit. Like, they're going to be really good on defense too. Like, this team, it could rack up, if they're healthy this year, like, they could rack up a ton of wins.
I agree with you. And I think the other thing that I like you brought up is, like, yes, there is a ceiling on Mikal Bridges, we think. He's a rotation player.
Well, he's also
a starter.
24. He wouldn't have been on our list if we had the old criteria.
That is correct. So I think, and that's why he is where he is. Like, you and I love Mikal Bridges, and this isn't a shot at Mikal Bridges. I just don't think he has the potential to, like, turn himself into an all-star. I think he's going to be a good starter-level player in the league. He does the exact things that winning teams need done. So he's always going to have a role on a good team, which is also good for a young player. Because sometimes, I mean, we talked about Colin Sexton, scoring guard.
Not a universal fit with good teams. It's like, okay,
no.
So that's what's tough about Colin Sexton and John Collins and Cam Reddish. It's like, okay, you have those three guys. Maybe a greater upside maybe those are going to be your three guys. Well, if you had Lonzo Ball, Mikal Bridges, and PJ Washington, and you put them next to 2 stars, I'm like, we're in the title contention this year.
Yep. It fits together perfectly. On to 18. 18 is Gary Trent Jr.
Gary, Minnesota guy. Late
Minnesota
conference,
guy.
baby.
Gary Trent.
That's our lineage.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, you're not far. No, so Gary Trent had one of the most absurd runs that we've seen in the bubble. He shot the hell out of the ball from 3. And that's why he became such a revelation is Gary Trent pre-bubble was just a guy that was getting rotation minutes and not talked about a lot. And
let's
he
be
was
honest,
just kind
of... Before we get to that point, that was a win because he was...
Yeah, for sure.
20 to start the season, turned 21 in the middle of the season, super fucking young, a second-round draft pick, and he was already a rotation guy that was contributing
100%.
At the most valuable position in the league.
No, it would have been a win had he just produced the way that he did pre-bubble, which was he found himself in the rotation, which was a massive win. Then he ends up turning into an insanely productive player in the bubble, and he did it on both. The shocking thing was not that he went on a crazy run from 3. There are guys in the league that can shoot the 3, and if you go on a 10 or 12 game run, you can just be really hot. But what he did defensively was something I didn't know he had in him, period, let alone at his age. I certainly didn't think he was going to have it in him as young as he is, but I didn't know that was even going to really be a part of his game. I thought he was going to be primarily kind of the shooting offensive first kind of player off the bench. He was fantastic. I'll ask you, what is his potential upside? What do you see as his potential upside?
I couldn't put a ceiling on it because I think
Me neither.
Right now he is in a wonderful position to keep coming along this path. Maybe he'll start at the 3. Maybe he'll come off the bench. He's probably going to get anywhere from 24 to 28 minutes a game this season. I think he earned that last year. Portland is exceptionally deep. So I think on a lot of teams, you'd just be like, all right, well, he's going to play 35 minutes a game straight up.
Yeah.
But he's in a great position right now to continue to slowly add shit to his game because there's not going to be any pressure to create offensively unless he's in a second unit with no Dame or CJ and they don't stagger those dudes at all. But he's going to be in a position to continue to just space offensively, be an absolute pit bull on defense. And at age 21, I'm just like, I don't see why there should be a ceiling on this guy. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, we should have had him higher, to be honest. Like, I think he's going to be, I think he already is a really good player, and I think he could, there's no reason why he couldn't get better. And I think he's somebody, he's probably coming up on free agency because he was a second rounder. I'm going to have to look this up, but like, he is somebody that's going to get paid. If he even just has the same season he had last season, the dude is going to get minimum Dylan Brooks money. And what a coup for Portland. I mean, Portland, I think we have, and I think you could be critical of their drafting strategy around Dame and CJ. They really prioritize taking swings, and that kind of manifested itself in them not having a lot of solid rotation guys the last handful of years. But now we're coming into this season, and that stuff is starting to pay off, and they're going to have him in the rotation along with Anthony Simons, Zach Collins, maybe Nas Little. It's like they have all these young guys that they took big swings on, and they worked. I'm going to be honest. Like, they worked. Like, if you, to take someone boom and bust like that at those spots, it's like, well, the bust potential is they're not in the league. Well, it's like they're still around, man. And they also have Harry Giles. It's like they have all of these young guys that they took big swings on, and it's panning out. And Portland is another team where we're like, they have a big season forthcoming.
Yeah, they do. And I want to say, too, it's so funny because before last year, we joked about Anthony Simons basically being the new Roddy Boubouin.
Yeah,
like
and you know who the new one is?
Who's that?
Taylor Horton Tucker.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, yeah, you're right. So there's these guys where it's like, that is the young player that team will not entertain offers for because they think there's this like no ceiling type potential. They want to make sure that this isn't going to pop.
Not to be confused with Bam Adebayo when you say no ceilings.
Yeah, bam, no ceilings out of bio. But no, what I was going to say is like Anthony Simons, I mean, he could still be a fine player, but Gary Trent was not talked about at all. And it was because of where he got picked. Like, he was a second-round guy. And it's funny how you're right. Like, they go into a year with some real talent off their bench, young guys. But it's funny that Gary Trent was the one who, like, really popped and could get paid because he was probably the least likely to actually end up there. So kudos to him for that.
What a stacked draft. My God, that 2018 draft was. And, like,
for real.
Trent, it's so funny. Even at his age, 21 currently, if he was a 21-year-old that was available in this draft and had the package that he has, he would have been a top 6 pick.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be honest, that's why I led this conversation. We'll move on, but that's why I led with putting it to you about what the ceiling is, because I tried to think about it before we got on the podcast. I'm like, I don't honestly know, man.
So,
like,
and that's why, so we had the grouping of the 3 young wings there with him, Bridges, and Reddish. The reason why we ultimately have Trent the highest is because he mixes the current day production of Bridges with the upside of Reddish and has it in one package.
I would agree with that. So we'll move on to the last 4 on this list that we're going to cover all bigs. So the order that it's a definite group. So 17 we had.
Do you want to just do the whole thing? Those 4?
Yeah, we can do that. So we had, this was 17. So 17 was Triple J. 16 was Lauri Markkanen, 15 Brandon Clark, and 14 Marvin Bagley. So similar to what you just mentioned with the wing grouping of Trent, Bridges, Reddish, the order is purely based on our vision of what their potential upside is, ranging from Marvin Bagley up to Triple J. So let's just keep continuity and go top down. So we'll go with Triple J first. So
this is controversial.
It is. And to be honest, last year we would have said he probably...
I think he was 8 or 9 on our list last year.
Yeah, he was 7.
7.
He was 7
there you
last
go.
year. So yeah, a big drop for him, but we talked about this a lot when we were putting together our list, and like, this is no shot at Triple J. What this is a realization as we talk through it of what he does now, what we think he is going to develop into, and the guys in front of him, for a myriad of reasons, we are just a little bit higher on. It's not to say Triple J is the definitive 4th option of this group, and he's a mile behind the 3 guys in front of him. It's just as simple as Triple J, we went through it, does not rebound the ball. Just simply doesn't rebound the ball. And he shoots the 3 well.
Very well, and at volume.
And at volume, I love that. I love the stretching of the floor. But that's about the end of it. He is really good from 3. And he, at his size, can stretch the floor. Super valuable. We don't really know what else he can do at even like a somewhat elite level. And the biggest thing for me was I don't think he's great off the bounce. And I think the guys in front of him are.
Yeah, and he is not who we thought he was going to be defensively in the league.
Great point.
Was and this is what we talked about when we put the list together the other night. He was advertised as being what Bam Adebayo is defensively. Multi-positional. Yes. Like, that was the whole thing about him, is like they're like, oh, he's not going to be a very good offensive player, but he's going to be a switchable monster on defense. And it's like, that hasn't really proven to be the case. I mean, at this point, he can't even really play center defensively because most of the biggest centers in the league will mash him. And he is not like, you're not like throwing him out there against Paul George or LeBron James incredibly defending them on the wing. And so he's a little bit in that John Collins range of being kind of just a 4. The difference being, it's like, he will be able to play the 5 soon, hopefully this season. But they need that. Like, that's the thing. It's like, they need it, and then they need him to do more in his game. Otherwise, and this is super valuable again, but they're hanging their hat on him being a all-star every year.
Yeah.
All NBA
for
type
sure.
of guy every year. If he just bulks up, right, credibly defends centers, is a above average defensive starting center, and is a stretch guy on offense, that's Brook Lopez, bro. That's Miles Turner. Like, that's not the insane value that you're looking for out of that high of a draft pick and a guy that is spoken in the way that people speak on Triple J.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And the other thing about Triple J is it's so hard to figure out what he is going to turn into. And the other thing that I don't really like, and this is not a fault of his, he missed time his rookie year, and then he's not going to be ready for the start of the year.
Right.
And it's not really known when he's going to be back. And so this is a young player that's already dealt with injury issues. And again, that's not his fault, but it does factor into when you're, and again, it's ironic that we have Marvin Bagley ahead of him when I'm talking about injury issues. But again, like it matters. And it also is one of those things where, like, when you're a young player and you have a lot of developing to do, it's really hard to miss time and think that you're going to reach whatever your potential is, or that the injury concerns are significant enough that you just are never physically allowed to reach it. My thing with Triple J is he is a productive offensive player, and the floor stretching is real, and it's incredibly valuable. But what you said about his defense, and again, he's super young, he could develop this. But what we were sold that this guy is going to defend like crazy and basically be a one-man wrecking crew on the defensive side of the floor. That has certainly not been the case. My argument about him, too, would be he can play center, and he likely will this year. But what I envisioned, you brought up Bam. I hate all the Bam comparisons because it's been just crazy how many players apparently are going to be Bam or like Bam. But that's kind of what I envisioned, where it's like, no, this guy, he's not going to be a traditional rim protector, but he is going to get blocks, and he's going to be everywhere. He's going to move around the floor, and he's going to be everywhere helping you out. We haven't seen it.
Well,
so
there's a reason why, like, they extended Valanciunas last year, and why they're not stupid. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like they don't. That's the kind of the funniest thing between people that cover the game at a kind of not a high level, and then even guys like us that are just fans and have other jobs. It's like you just go like, well, why don't you play Triple J at center and not Valanciunas? And like, as if that's not something that has ever occurred to the Memphis Grizzlies team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they know, man. And like they have these big body centers next to him because they know he can't take that pounding right now. Like,
yep.
And the next guy on the list, I think it leads into well, is someone that has produced at a similar, if not higher level than him, Markkanen, and just hasn't been fortunate enough to be in the type of role that Triple J has been in. Like, you cannot tell me that if Markkanen was in Triple J's spot last year, that Memphis would have sucked. It would have cratered their season. And then on the flip side, like if Triple J was in Chicago last year, like he would have been the elixir for all of the things that illed them. It's like, I just think he's a lot closer to this group of guys than most people do, which I think most people would have him in the top 10 of this list.
You and I are super high on Lauri Markkanen, and here's what I'll say. Biggest difference between him and Triple J in my eyes, number one, somehow Markkanen rebounds a little bit better.
Way better.
He
gets two times as many rebounds a game.
Yeah, so he's a better rebounder. But more importantly, he can do more off the dribble, which, again, playmaking is a part of this because of who these guys are supposed to be. Like, we're not talking about traditional centers or traditional bigs. We're just talking about guys that have massive frames, 6'11" and 7 feet between the two of them, that need to kind of be able to play make a little bit. And Lauri Markkanen's better off the dribble. And I actually
It's a more varied offensive game, period.
Much more varied offensive game.
Now, Jackson is a bomber and is better shooter. It's crazy because Markkanen, that was like Markkanen, you were like, oh, is the shooter. Triple J is a better shooter than him. In a basketball game, he's a better shooter. I bet if they're warming up, Markkanen is fucking nailing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
In the context of a game, Triple J is a better shooter. But like Markkanen also just does way more shit on the floor.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, you mentioned swapping them spots if Markkanen went to Memphis and Triple J came to Chicago. Here's what I'll tell you. Triple J going to Chicago, we feel the same way about him that we currently do of Wendell Carter. And if Lauri Markkanen is in Memphis and he's able to play make coming with that roster around him, like Markkanen is much closer to what we think he is than he is today because of the roster he's been on in Chicago. So I'm just... Lauri Markkanen, whether it happened in Chicago, I have high hopes for him this season. I think Billy Donovan, the coaching upgrade in Chicago is so enormous that I think everybody's going to benefit. But if it doesn't work out in Chicago, like I'm going down with the ship on Lauri Markkanen. Like he then needs to find a different team because it will work. Like I'm very confident.
What's his
it'll
downside?
work.
Like getting paid $16 million a year like Davis Bertans does? You know what I mean? It's like
if Lauri Markkanen just for one season increased his 3-point percentage to 40% on volume,
2 points.
yeah, if he shoots 40% with volume, that dude's getting paid the same exact fucking contract that Davis Bertans just signed. So yeah, the guy's going to get paid and he's going to work. I'm confident in it. 15 is interesting because Triple J is 17. His teammate Brandon Clark is 15,
who's a lot older than him too. We should say that.
Who's a lot older. So here was my justification for it, and then I want you, because we didn't really talk about it in a lot of depth, so I'll tell you why I believe he deserves that spot over Triple J, and then you can tell me if I'm totally crazy on this. Brandon Clark has a lower ceiling, we think, but a higher floor. My argument, though, would be that the floor that Brandon Clark has is really, really high. And
it might be comparable to Triple J's ceiling. No, it's not. But
no, it's not. But no, Brandon Clark was awesome last year. He's an older player, so again, we made some tweaks, obviously, to the format of the podcast. He wouldn't have been on it if we cut it at 23. Brandon Clark doesn't make it. He's 24. But he had a really good season. He's got a little bit of three-point shooting. He shot like 35-36 from three-point, which is great.
He does everything, man.
And defensively, he's awesome. He's just a really good defensive player.
Very versatile. He's a dog.
Very versatile. I just think he, no matter what, fits on a winner. Triple J to me is TBD on whether or not he fits on a winner. So I just believe in Brandon Clark more if I'm trying, especially I'm super high on Memphis' future. It's not just a Ja Morant thing. I think they've done great stuff on the edges. They have their right coach. The front office seems pretty buttoned up. I'm high on them, and I think Brandon Clark fits on a winner. Triple J very well could. And Triple J may be, by next season, a much better player. We don't know. But Brandon Clark, I'm just betting on the dude fits on a winner, and he's great, and he's going to get better.
Yeah, and the thing about a guy at this age, and this is what we thought about Obi Toppin too, is it's not like he's 24 and he just like played at North Carolina for 4 seasons and is very polished, and it's just been a straight line to this point. You know, he, like Obi Toppin, but we'll stick with Clark here. It's like he had a weird path, like non-elite young player, San Jose State, transfers, sits out a year, plays at Gonzaga, kicked ass at Gonzaga, and then goes into the league older because of that, kicks ass his rookie year. Like, I think it's possible he's just really good, man. Like, the dude, the last 2 seasons he's played at Gonzaga and now Memphis, he's just been incredibly productive. Like, to me, it was the 3rd best rookie this year, and it's really not even close with Ja and Zion. Like, he was incredible this year, and even if his production doesn't improve going forward, it's like, well, he's already a guy that fills up the stat sheet everywhere, is super efficient, crazy athletic, like, is just a good player right now, period.
Yeah, no, he is. And I think what you brought up there, we always do this. Like, we're very ageist in the NBA, and it's funny how it's like, well, he's 24, and he's, it's like, yeah, man, but he gets better every year. And so those are the types of players, and it's similar to kind of what I mentioned about John Collins when we led this podcast. It's like, I'm sorry, if he's improved every year that he's been in the league, and with Brandon Clark, I mean, it's been an improvement from college to the pros, but if he improves every year of his basketball career, why is it that we somehow believe that we know exactly who he's going to be and what he can and cannot do? He's already super hyper productive. I believe that that'll continue to improve, but it goes back to what we've said this entire podcast. We value guys who fit on winners, because the tough watch teams, we're not saying that as a slight to these teams. The league is always filled with teams that are not winning and competing for titles. What we want to see is...
That's what happens when one team wins and one team loses.
It's amazing. It's amazing how it works. But no, that's what we love to see with these teams and why we cover them, is it's like, okay, do you have winning players? Because if you're drafting and developing enough winning players, then you can kind of organically move yourself into competing at a high level. If you have too many guys that don't really have the skill set to be on a winner, then you're pretty well fucked, and you might have to start over. You know, that's
we've seen
why
a lot of these teams in the tough watch cycle through this over and over again. And like, you're wearing the Timberwolves hat. That's why the Timberwolves have had to cycle through this over and over again.
Yes, absolutely.
So that begs the question. Well, I'll do the transition here, Dan. Like, that begs the question then, is why is Marvin Bagley higher than those other guys?
I don't have a good answer. Here's what I'm going to say. I am irrationally, like, borderline obsessed with Marvin Bagley, because if Marvin Bagley can stay healthy and he can be on the floor, he is the player that needs to be alongside De'Aaron Fox. I believe it wholeheartedly. I believe that Sacramento has actually done the right thing by drafting these two players, because I think if they're both healthy and on the floor...
They come on, man. They did not... They should have...
Luka.
Yeah, okay. But we can move on from that. Who cares? That's talking head conversation stuff. That's stupid. That should happen 2 years ago. We're over it.
Yeah, the Luka thing they'll never be forgiven for. But no, that's fine. Like, just take that out of it, that when they drafted Bagley, it
already
ended up being the Luka draft. But what I'm saying is, like, to credit them, I believe they've gotten two building block young players that they themselves have drafted, which is a feather in the cap, because a lot of teams can't say that. A lot of teams don't have that kind of draft success. Problem with Marvin Bagley is he may never be healthy and never, because of that, able to live up to his potential. But Marvin Bagley is the exact kind of player we've been talking about this with a bunch of guys on this list, like malleability. Like, do you have versatility? Can you play multiple positions? Marvin Bagley is freakishly athletic.
Yeah,
he's damn
elite.
near 7 feet tall.
Elite physically.
Yeah, he's physically elite. He has a ton of versatility. And on top of that, because we haven't seen him in games very often, it's still so undetermined how good he can be on both ends of the floor, really, but like specifically on offense. Because, again, when you're floating in and out of the lineup due to health issues, like, how the fuck are you supposed to develop when you're, 19, 20 years old? He's 21 now.
Yeah, he's right. Another reclassification guy where he jumped into his draft class out of nowhere. It was just like, I remember it was like August of that year. It was like, oh, Marvin Bagley enrolled at Duke. And you're like, oh, shit, I thought Marvin Bagley was the number one pick in the 2019 draft. I guess he's in 2018 now. Great.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
But he's not like a lot of these guys that were like great young players and just haven't had shit work out for them when they got into the higher levels, where you're like, yeah, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. Like, he is elite, like you said, measurables, and as an athlete, like as a 7-foot deer basically out there, the way he moves, like the dude is elite. But the difference between him and a lot of guys like that is he's not bad at basketball. Like, it's a really, it's almost like a really simple analysis. That's like, the dude is a crazy athlete and he's also good, and he just needs to stay healthy and stay on the court. And you're right, it's too early to even say, because he hasn't been on the court long enough to know. It's too early to be like, well, what's his position and can you win with him? It's like, well, let's first play 70 games in a season, or I guess it's a 72 game season this year. Let's play 55 games this year,
Yes.
And like, let's see what that is. Because he is, it's like he was super high on our list last year. We hope he's super high next year. Like, he is a grab and go guy. Here's the difference between him and Obi Toppin or even Triple J. It's like, does he have great defensive instincts? He doesn't, but he moves really well side to side and up and down. And he looks massive. Like, he should be big enough to guard centers soon. He should be flexible enough to switch onto the perimeter soon. And if they play 5 out this year, like they say they're going to, like, the dude is going to have a crazy amount of space to operate with Fox. And I agree. I think they could surprise some teams in the same way that, like, we thought they were going to be good last year. But, like, if they truly are playing 5 out this year, like, it should be a big season for Fox, and it should be a big season for Bagley if he's healthy. And they should have enough shooting out in the court with them where they really should have a wide open paint.
Yeah, he's the biggest boom bust candidate on this entire list. His bust potential is that the health concerns derail his entire career. Like, it could be that catastrophic. If that's not the case, then I just don't see a world in which Marvin Bagley isn't at the very least a starter at his position, whatever it is that you want that to be, whether that be forward or center. I just don't see it being any worse than that, because when he's played, I mean, he has career averages don't jump off, but like, he's averaged 14 and 7.
No, but it's one of those guys where it's like he's so productive per minute when he's out there. It's not Zion level, and obviously there's a reason why Zion's going to be really high on this list and Bagley hasn't, but he's one of those guys where it's like he's so good when he gets out there, like he just puts up crazy per minute numbers because he's just such a freak.
Yes, absolutely. that is 25 through 14. So we're gonna say we did a nice job. We kept it pretty tight.
That was tight.
Yeah, it was. And 1 through 13 is going to be next week's podcast. This is, I mean, for me, I can't speak for you. It's my favorite off-season podcast that we do. The exercise, and I would advocate for anybody who's just a fan of the league, if you find yourself a free hour or two, it's a fun exercise to do because it reinforced something you and I talk about all the time in a really flippant way, which is this league is so talent-rich right now. And going through a list like that, Rick sent me the master list, which probably had like 60, 62 guys on it. And then the first go around where I was trying to whittle down to guys that could be in the top 25, I whittled it down to 42 guys. So there are 42 guys that I thought could potentially make a top 25 list.
It's the 42
crazy.
under 24. It's a classic conceit.
We'll have to put that on. Maybe that's
on
the
poster. That's on the marquee.
That's on the poster. But no, so it's a really fun exercise, one of my favorite podcasts. And in a week where there was actually like a lot of NBA news, you know, we try and stay in our lane. This is our lane. We covered the teams.
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
It's
yeah,
tough watch season.
But yeah, it was, you know, John Wall was traded for Russell Westbrook, which was huge. Training camps open today. I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on. The schedule got released. And games are going to start on the 22nd, I believe, which is only a couple weeks out. So there's just a ton going on. But we're going to be back next week. We're going to do the top half of this group. And I hope everybody...
Yeah, we'll do that, and then win totals, and then the next pod after that is just like our normal tough watch schedule. And, you know, we'll figure that out. And obviously the league doesn't even have a full schedule released because they don't know. So certainly we don't know what our schedule is going to be, but we'll figure that out.
Yes. And last week's pod, if you didn't listen, we announced officially who the 14 teams are that are going to be, you know, our tough watch teams, at least for the early part of the year that we'll cover. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, man. And 1 through 13 is going to be a blast. We're going to be taking some big swings and really putting our name on some guys here. So that's going to be great.
Always fun.
All right. Take care, and we'll see you in a week.
All right. See you later.